winters. Forest elders breathe their last. I'll bring them for your supper. Every piece of wood I bring carries a story in lichen, fungus, beetles.
Hey, you're listening to the Ground Shots podcast, a podcast that explores our relationship to ecology through conversations and storytelling. Welcome to episode number 80. I can't believe that we have made it to 80 episodes. I heard some statistic recently that most podcasts don't make it past 5 episodes. So thank you over the years for listening to this unfolding storytelling project, interviewing people of many different realms and connecting them all together here with me. We're here at 80 with Elizabeth Yaari. I'm excited to share this convo with you. I'm hoping to get out couple more episodes before the new Gregorian calendar new year. This episode with Elizabeth took place a week or two ago on the hill here where I'm currently living on my friend's land, and she caretakes the property right next door that is her food forest project. I met Elizabeth last winter when I was going to these meetings at the library around permaculture and regenerating landscapes and ecologies. And I remember she turned around when I started talking and said, "I think I know you from the podcast." I think that's how it went. It's all a blur a little bit, but I know we connected during those meetings and then came over to her land and the sort of watershed. There's like a drainage. You'll hear about it in this episode. We'll be talking about it a little bit, but there's like a little drainage between Megan's property where I'm staying and Elizabeth's, where we did some experimentation with beaver analog dams and gave them both biscuit root seeds to plant across their land, being a little more sagebrush, saltbush, what we would call barrens, but not really actually barren at all. Actually full of life and beauty and diversity and complexity, but gave them seeds. I wasn't sure how long I'd be here. Honestly, at that time, I kept thinking I would be leaving soon, as often is a thought in my mind when I'm anywhere. So I gotta get to the next place, but I definitely didn't think I'd still be here in some capacity, and especially right here on these hills. I took some of my students in May to Elizabeth's property in the food forest to tour it and for her to show us what she's doing and to encourage the students to see what we could do with water, tending, and plants with the private land as a thing, but also what we do beyond private land bounds and just showing another way. So I came in the spring here too to show folks Elizabeth's project. It was such a lush spring in this region, so it was very full of plants and greens and just everything was just so blooming and full on. I've got a few pictures from that visit that are in the show notes for this episode. I didn't take a ton of pictures, but I took a couple, her talking to the students and her on the land in the spring, so you can get a tiny glimpse of like the land, but you really it just still doesn't give it a full justice. But I will try to see if I have any more as I record this. I'm not sure if I have any more pictures from that time of year. I love Elizabeth's stories and her humor and her way of articulating things. Just to give you a short bio of who she is. Together with the insects, animals, plants, and elements, Elizabeth Yaari is transforming a dry patch of semi-arid desert into a thriving, regenerative 7-layered food forest. Anything is possible, she says, even when you have 6.5 inches of rain a year. To spend time with Elizabeth is to enter a realm where depth matters and play reigns. As an enthusiastic member of the Design School of Regenerating Earth, Elizabeth learns to create earthworks and microclimates which benefit not only neighbors on the same watershed, but also all of life in the surrounding bioregion. So I'm going to give you a few bullet points on what we touch on in this episode, and then a tiny bit of housekeeping stuff for the podcast, and then we'll move right into the conversation. So in this episode of the podcast, we talk about why Elizabeth started the Night Owl Food Forest. We talk about her relationship to art, eco-grief, and planting. We talk about the permaculture course Elizabeth took with Pat Frazier and Wynn Clearwater locals here in Paonia, Colorado, and how it influenced her work on the land. Elizabeth tells a funny story of trying to sex a cow with permaculture teacher Pat Frazier and how it taught her to observe. We talk about working on the land over many years and how it gives you way more knowledge of a place and its nuances than reading books. So we talk a bit about the nature of the night owl food forest, geologically, ecologically, and some of Elizabeth's goals for restoration and regeneration. We talk about what Elizabeth learned about people from getting their compost for the food forest to build the soil. We talk about how Elizabeth works with the local community to build the food forest. We speak on thinking long-term, beyond private land borders, and being dedicated to small spaces. We speak to water and permaculture at the Night Owl Food Forest. We talk about observations Elizabeth has made at the Night Owl Food Forest. And observation, of course, is the first step to tending land. We also talk about sagebrush, saltbush, and greasewood halophytes that can tolerate salt and poor soil, in quotations, in a permaculture setting. Some of what Elizabeth has planted at the Night Owl Food Forest. We speak to where Elizabeth planted biscuit root seeds on her land and why. We talk about slowing, sinking, and spreading water and how that is necessary, especially at a spot like the Night Owl Food Forest. We speak a little bit about permaculture in desert environments, though there's plenty to explore there. We talk about how Elizabeth made her hugelkultur beds with cottonwoods cut down by beavers. We talk about prairie dogs a bit and how the prairie dog tunnels become conduits for water, provide spaces where water can hide further up hills and could be considered a riparian zone by some. And at the end, kind of in the tradition of how we did it for the Kauai Food Forest conversations, we do an audio tour of the Night Owl Food Forest in the snow with Elizabeth, where she points out things to me and you can hear us walking around. And it's not a full tour of the whole place, but it's kind of a neat glimpse. A couple housekeeping things before we get to this conversation. I've got a sale going in the Ground Shots Herbs apothecary shop right now at ofsedgeandsalt.com, our website. All that's always linked in the show notes. It's a pop-up for the holidays, and there's a bunch of different medicines in there listed, small batch, seasonally gathered or grown here in Paonia, Colorado, gathered across the West for the most part. Some of it is tried and true favorites that I've been offering for quite a while, and some things are new, and a few of the things are very small batch. So ofsedgeandsalt.com, the store is on the main web page, just where the podcast also lives with the blog posts that I make for each episode, where I usually have the extended show notes and pictures and things like that from the episodes. So support me, support this project, get some medicine for your apothecary. It's still not too late to order stuff. I will be posting some crafts too later in the winter, but I won't be doing another sale with medicine until the spring, probably. I don't have a full plan for when the next one will be, but it won't be any earlier than the spring. So that's just something to think about too. Hey, as I'm doing some final edits on this episode, I decided to make a discount code for listeners. I'm not going to announce this code anywhere else. If you listen to this episode, this will be your chance to hear it and use it in the apothecary. Put in listen at checkout and you'll get 10% off. And there's going to be different sales going on at different moments between now and next Friday, where that'll be probably about the last day that I could ship out to get to you your orders in time for Christmas. I can continue to ship out after that, but I won't be able to get it to you by Christmas at that point. But there's going to be different moments where different sets of things are on sale. There's already been some that have been, and so pay attention to the store for when that happens at different moments. And I'll be posting some more buttons too this week. I posted some recently and they went pretty quick, so they're handmade buttons by me. Listen at checkout is your discount code for Ground Shots podcast listeners. I'm not going to announce it anywhere else except for this episode right now. Take that code and you'll get 10% off. A couple more things just to remind you, I have a bookshop account. So if you buy books from Amazon or big corporate retailers online, you can support a small seller bookshop, and it also supports people who have affiliation with them. And so I have an account with Bookshop. And if you buy books on Bookshop through my account with my affiliate link, you are supporting the Ground Shots podcast. And I often recommend books and do pretty extended resource show notes for many of the episodes. Not every single one, but a lot of them. I have a lot of books linked. And I've been starting to link Bookshop account listings for these books that I recommend in my show notes when I can. Some of them are not on Bookshop, but many of them are. If you buy that book through my link, it gives the podcast a kickback, and also you can go to the general shop where I have a bunch of books listed, recommended or well-loved by me, or the greater podcast community where you can buy the books for yourselves. And again, it gives us a kickback. There's also a wish list in my account that you can find that are books I want to own that you can choose to buy for me, and it will be mailed to me. Tuning in here again as I'm doing final edits on this episode, I just checked on my Bookshop account and I realized that I actually get a kickback when you buy me a book as well. I thought it was just for books that I recommended that you buy, but if you buy me a book, I also get a kickback, which was super exciting to discover suddenly. Because a handful of people have bought me books, so I've gotten support for the podcast by you also buying me a book. So that's like double support, because then I can continue to read and research these topics. And you can buy the book for you, and you can buy the book for me, and I get a kickback for the project. So that's super cool. Thanks. Bookshop is such a neat thing. I don't even know where I first found it, but I've been really appreciating looking up stuff on there too. Every time I hear about different books from different podcast guests or books that people are recommending to me, I'm like, I'm gonna look it up on Bookshop and see if it's there. The link for the Bookshop account is in my show notes of every episode. And if you don't see the full show notes in your iTunes or Spotify, sometimes they have word limits that my show notes surpass. You can always find the full show notes with all the resources I have linked for every episode. Another cool collaboration I have going is with my friends down in Southwest Colorado, Vibrant Earth Seeds out of Cortez, McElmo Canyon area. They grow seasonally adapted seeds for the Southwest or dry climates, though many of their seeds can be grown beyond that. If you want to order seeds now for the spring, you can get 10% off, and also I get a kickback for the podcast if you use the code GroundShots10. It helps them sell really awesome small batch seasonally adapted and grown Southwestern seeds. Helps you plant an amazing garden that's resilient and has seeds that are intelligent and full of many years of wisdom and held inside of them. And then it also helps the podcast out. Another way you can support the podcast and support me as a writer, an artist, and a person doing multifaceted work in the world is to subscribe at my Substack, groundshots.substack.com. I've been really enjoying the community, collaborative-oriented nature of Substack. So you can subscribe, do plenty of public posts and sharing of writings I'm working on, or shares pretty regularly lately anyways. And then I have some private writings I've shared and I plan to share. And then I also do Ground Shots Extras podcast episodes on there that are for subscribers only. So if you want to hear more insights from me and a private podcast, you can subscribe that way. And that support really, really helps me have flexibility in my work and not have to go out to find other work. It keeps me here focused on this. So really appreciate it if you subscribe. You can always subscribe for free and decide later to become a paid subscriber or become a paid one and change your mind later. So groundshots.substack.com. There's also Venmo and PayPal links in the show notes for every single episode. Kelly-Moody-6 is my Venmo. Check the show notes for this episode. I did pretty meticulous show notes, writing down a lot of the things we talked about and then linking them for you to further research. So scroll down to the bottom of the blog page for this episode and click through and check out some of the people she's mentioned, Elizabeth mentions, and some of the resources we've mentioned, institutes, all kinds of different things. They're linked there in the show notes. And I really hope you enjoy this glimpse into the night owl food forest in Paonia, Colorado with Elizabeth. And I hope you get some good laughs too at some of her quirky stories and feel some shared awe at some of her reflections on the land and find inspiration to also observe and reflect on the land that you have access to.
Cedar splits, I offer sweat and splinters. Forest elders breathe.
You can hear the train even.
Yeah. You can hear the deer over there getting up. There were the deer nested. I'm almost apologetic as I come. I'm almost apologetic as I get up. Come up that hill. Have you seen them? They all nest. They have their little beds. And when I come during the day, normally they've left. But today I wasn't here until now, and so they're still in bed. They're still like, what do they do? Ruminate? They sit there and chew the cud, don't they? And they're like, whoa, bright-eyed and everything, and stotting off, as they go. And I'm just so apologetic because I purposely don't live up here so that the animals can walk and have an animal corridor here. And yet, when I bring the car up and then the trailer is rattling on the back of it, it's like, human has arrived, arrived. And I don't like that they have to run away, I really don't want to cause harm. I really don't.
Yeah, I mean, with the snow this morning, too. Like, oh, what a wonderful morning to be a deer.
Yeah.
And the first big snow, Yeah. Well, maybe we could start. You could introduce yourself and how you got into doing this food forest, because I actually don't fully know the whole story behind it, too, even though I know you personally. So I'd be curious, your introduction and just your motivation to start it, your background in that, and then we can get more into like what you're doing actually right now and go from there. Yeah.
Okay, so my name's Elizabeth Yaari, and started the food forest as a result of eco-grief. I didn't know what eco-grief was until it happened to me. And it was pretty severe. I was feeling that where I was living in New York, that the animals and the trees, the plants were not okay. Something was up. And can't describe it as anything else than a feeling. And then I was given this, I used to be a facilitator and an artist, and I was given this wonderful commission, a really lovely commission, to do a painting of a tree with a waterfall. A huge silk painting for a synagogue, for a sanctuary, for the ark to be would be behind that. And I sat down and I got up my silk paints and I started painting, and normally I can just paint a tree and water, it just flows and just grows. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't get that tree to be healthy. I tried 5 times to draw a healthy tree with water. And one time it was completely diseased and weird looking, brownish, grayish. Another time it was completely windswept, branches were going all in one direction. It was dark and stormy. That was the only water that was in the picture. Another time it was just weird, it was just very abstract. I tried that, it didn't work. And one time I tried and it was just a tree with one single piece of fruit on it. And so I went back to the people who commissioned me and I said, something's up here, I'm not sure, I'm going to show you the pictures, and I know that it's probably not what you're looking for, but I'm sorry. I really don't, I couldn't put my finger on it then. And then I decided that because I'd facilitated art workshops before, I thought, you know what, Elizabeth, you know what's going on here? You're really feeling what's going on with the trees. And maybe it's time to plant more trees. Give back. Plant a food forest. So I seriously have no history in planting food forests other than doing a permaculture apprenticeship in Costa Rica. And that's totally different trees than here. And so I just decided to start my studies on the East Coast, and I went to do a permaculture and a biodynamic course, which was combined permadynamics. And the teachers were Pat Frazier and Wind Clearwater, and they said, Elizabeth, if you'd like to grow a food forest, come to Paonia. We'd have a few here. And so I did. I packed up and I came here. I left my family, I left my friends. The impulse was so strong to be able to plant those trees and let them become very fruitful, very, very beautiful. Let them become the tree that I was trying to paint. And
you only knew Wind and a couple other people here when you moved from the permaculture training?
That's right, yes. I only knew Wind and Pat. Those were two people. So I stayed with Pat, actually. She was very gracious. I had my van and I stayed on her land and I helped her. And in the course of that, Pat is a great teacher in that she asks questions and then she'll leave you for 3 days, to answer the questions. And this was in husbandry, animal husbandry, and seriously, I didn't know anything about cows or sheep or anything. And I remember one question I had of her, actually. I said, she was talking about cows being on heat, and I didn't know what an animal looked like when it was on heat. And particularly a cow. I mean, I know, dogs or humans or any, living being can change color a little bit. It can go a little red. Well, I wasn't sure about a cow. And I said, Pat, how can you tell when the cow's on heat, when Diamond is on heat? And she said, well, just observe. And so I go up to the cow, looking at the cow, asking the cow, help me here, help me. What? Maybe you move around a little bit more, than normal. And she said, well, that's possible, but look at the vagina. And so a few days, to look at to find the vagina. I didn't even know where the vagina was on the cow. I thought it was down by the udder. And so I was looking underneath thinking, and I was thinking,
you're like, where is it?
Where is it? And then I remembered, from videos or something, no, the calf comes out the back. Oh, okay, go to the back. And then I started to observe and see, yes, there's something happening with the vagina when the cow's on heat. There's a secretion of a sort. How beautiful that it's there, that we can see it, and understand this is animal husbandry. I'm still not at the stage, I think, where I can take on animals, but who knows? There's nothing that compares to having cows in a food forest. So I've heard. And so I would eventually like to take on a cow or two.
Maybe
like
goats?
Invite them in. Yeah, goats. Sheep, maybe.
I'd like to have goats.
So yeah. Horses. Yeah. So I stayed with Pat, and Pat was my biodynamic teacher, and then I connected also to Wind in town. He helped me with the first stages of the food forest.
Like getting it
because he's from
designed.
here. Yeah, there's nothing like actually being on some land and working on that land. You can read as many books as you like. However, when it gets to, realizing there's mud on your boots, like 5 inches thick, and they didn't talk about this in the books. What do you do with that, with all that clay? How do you work with all that clay? So it's really important, I think, to have land and to work with for me it was to work with whatever I have. And I'm basically working from the seat of my pants. I mean, I have no biology, botany, nothing background. All I have is a love for trees and plants and a passion to create this 7-layered food forest on some clay that was left over from like 100 million years ago when this was an inland sea. So it's kind of salty clay and semi-arid desert to boot too. So
this little nook right here in the valley, I guess it's officially Adobe's-esque. Adobe's is something you don't hear in places outside of this region, really, but they characterize some parts of, say, northern New Mexico as Adobes, but they all have their own energies. But, like, when I was from the east, I hadn't heard of anything called the Adobes, or, like, understand land geological formations like this. But it's a pretty unique little node that comes into this valley, the North Fork Valley, that is more out that way towards the Compadre, but this is kind of the end of it as you get into the mountains, I guess. So it's a neat little nook you got here.
Right, and to connect to that deep time, I interviewed or I invited over David No, who knows the land. He's a geology expert, and he explained that this was the mud at the bottom of the inland sea.
Wow.
And 82 million years ago those mountains came from the earth, and mountains were created, and at the edge of the sea was this vegetation. So the vegetation collapsed when the sea receded. And he said, "Hey, Elizabeth, you know what? You've got some of that vegetation on your land. It's 82 million year old compost." And I was thinking, woohoo! I was excited about that because I love composting. And then I realized what that compost was. But the sea receded and left, as far as I know, sagebrush, greasewood grows here, rabbit brush, saltbush, yes, all the hard, coarse bushes that can tolerate very cold winters and very hot summers. So that's what we're working with, and clay. So I did get excited about the 82 million year old compost. However, I started making my own. So when I bought the land, I thought I could either import a lot of soil, or I can just make it. And just over a very long period of time, I will be able to make the soil and amend the clay that's here, and then maybe not. Maybe I'll just grow whatever grows here. So I put an ad out in the town for anybody who has like kitchen scraps they'd like me to take, and so I have like 26 bins around the town that I gather all the kitchen scraps and bring them up and make a pile. And I bought a doggy day pen to put all the kitchen scraps in, because that seems to be the most it's the lightest thing for me to move around all the time, because it's just pieces of fencing connected by wires that I can put in and take out.
Do you get a lot of coffee grounds too, with the acidity? Yeah,
so there are a few coffee shops in town. I get their coffee grounds. That's the best part of collecting the compost, because that's the best smelling part. But it's actually funny, what has happened. I don't know how much this affects people, to tell you the truth, but I can just tell you my experience is that people become kind of self-conscious about what they put in their bin. And, I'm not like the compost policeman, for sure. I just collect it, and I dump it. And they'll come to the door and say, "Elizabeth, I'm so sorry about those white bagels." and I'm saying it's absolutely fine. It's okay.
You didn't put plastic bags in there. That's That's
Yeah.
what matters.
It was like it's a reflection of what they're eating, and they're suddenly getting a conscience about it, you know. And I obviously don't say a thing. I mean, it's just like it's fine. And but another person said my diet has changed since you've come round, because I felt so guilty of what I was putting in the bins. So I love that little interaction, and then those people are starting that contribute to making this soil are starting to come to visit and to see what's happening and to see the result. Not the result. It's not by any means the end. It's just this infinity loop of how we help each other in the town. You know, some people might put a little gift of pear butter or something on that next to their bin and say, "Don't forget the pear butter." You know, it's just how it works. It's a lovely. I don't charge for this, and it's a lovely little trade. And then they'll call me when there are leaves in town too. So gathering leaves at this time of the year is a big deal. And luckily in our town we've got this big vacuum cleaner that comes around for those that haven't gathered their own, and it sucks up the town's leaves and takes it to opposite the library where anybody can come and get it.
Oh,
it's
cool.
an open space, so I've been using that service. So I get the nitrogen in the kitchen scraps and the leaves, and those leaves could last, you know, pretty much into the next season. So I have that as the compost, and then I bring in wood chips. You know those people that chop down trees and then they chip them?
Mm-hmm.
Well, they generally take them to the dump, and so you have to kind of catch them or know these people. The choppers and the chippers, catch them in the middle of their work and say, come up to this address, instead of taking them to the dump. It reduces their expenses and time and in petrol, because they've obviously got to pay to go to the dump, and they have to pay to drop the chips there. So do get that free service. So that's to make the compost, yeah.
I have a friend in Moab, Utah, who was actually on episode 2 or 3 of the podcast, and we're on like 79 or 80 right now. She runs the Sundale Medicinals Apothecary in Moab. She grew up there, and she told me a story about how she owns a property in town that's just like a house with a pretty big backyard, and she would bike around town for a good couple years and collect like the compost, coffee grounds especially, and started like building her soil in the backyard there in Moab, right? And also similar soil stuff, lots of alkalinity, you know. And she built it up enough to where I've visited her gardens, and she grows a lot of stuff for her apothecary, like things that I've only seen people grow in Appalachia normally. And she's figured out how to build the soil in a good way and make the microclimates for those plants. And she's like, it just took a couple years of like being dedicated to the compost.
Yeah, surprising.
It's pretty cool.
I mean, you have to think long term. I'm thinking like 100 years. This project's going to take 100 years, you know. But every week, yeah. Well, one big compost pile. It does add up. It's got to be spread on 5.5 acres. But yeah, like your friend, I work in small spaces, so I'll just work around one tree, and I put the compost close to where I want to have the trees, so that it doesn't have to go far. Just work in small confined spaces at one time, and then connect them all, you know. Yeah, that's between making the soil and having enough water. So the water is also it's inconsistent. You get an inconsistent amount. Sometimes there's 6.5 inches a year.
Whoa.
Of rainwater, and then sometimes there's 10, and you know, but not much, not really much. And so storing water on the land to nourish the compost is also a challenge. So I've been doing some earthworks to slow sink and spread the water, and that's another way through time that you can build soil too. Maybe I can show you the hugel bed.
Yeah.
And the hugel bed terraces and the swales and the collection basin and then the infiltration basin.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
This zone right here too, I wonder, like, this valley has so many little microclimates, like, you know, we have a snow day happening right now a little bit, and in some places it's going to melt faster than other places, and in some places someone will get a frost early, and other places it won't be for a while, and it'll be, you know, I can, like, see over to the other side of the valley, and that's going to be maybe really different over there. And do you feel like this zone where we are right now, it seems like it's probably a hotter spot than other spots in the valley because of the, you know, there's hot air coming. That this valley can grow so much food. They call it a banana belt, I guess, because of the hot air that comes in from the Uncompadre. Am I correct about that? But like there's different parts of it. They get more of that, I guess, than others. But
yeah, you know, I was doing a lot of observation in the permaculture principles. The first one is to observe and interact with the land, and so I've got my little journal out, and wind direction is one thing, you know, observation, and I could sit there at 8 o'clock in the morning and measure the direction of the wind from the southwest, and then 8 minutes past 9, it could be coming from somewhere else. I mean, wow. It comes from everywhere, the wind, and it is interesting. And we're right in this little corridor where there's, because of that, and I guess because the wind too brings all the microorganisms and the mushroom spores and all these goodies with it in the air, we're gathering, you know, we're getting these microorganisms from way east of us and way south of us and west, and it just feels like, just like the people here really is a big mixture. Yeah, I think with, as far as the orientation north, south, east and west, when I'm walking the land, parts of it, say on a day like today and it's midday and the snow's melting, some of the snow would completely melt on plants that on half the plant that's facing the south, and then on the other side of the plant, especially down by its roots, it could be still frozen. And so it's every single plant seems to have its little microclimate and every little dimple in the land, you know.
I've been noticing since being in this yurt, which is right next door to your land. We didn't really say that in the interview, but we are hanging out not too far from your spot. I noticed this door in the Mongolian yurt. I don't know if it's just lately, but it wants to shut itself a lot from the wind coming from that way. It like catches the door and keeps wanting to shut it. And I'm just like, interesting. Like, I often feel like the wind's coming, so I have to prop it a lot. And so that's just an observation. I don't know. Like, it could be anything, but
it could be. And also, yeah, it's tricky because you can also, you know, watch the plants, obviously, the way that they sway. And they have sometimes they have a very, very slow sway. It seems, yeah, the wind seems to be coming from all directions. I tell you, I can't really tell. I love watching the plants, though. I mean, there's one flax in the spring. The flax is bent down towards the east and rises with the sun. And then the flower follows the sun up and up and up and up and over, and then bows down to the west.
Whoa.
And then drops that flower. And then I don't know, but maybe at night time it creeps around.
How does it get back
And
over to the east?
Exactly. So plants are moving the whole time. I think I'd love to just
Wow.
I'd love to just sit out at night and see what happens. I've watched it during the day, but it's not just the wind that turns the plants. It's the sun.
Wow.
How the power of the sun to turn a plant like that, and for the whole plant to benefit. It's moving continuously.
That's so cool.
Yeah.
Your spot compared to this spot, which is the neighbor's zone, you have more mature shrubs there. This spot doesn't really as much, like hardly any mature woody shrubs, and it's probably because of past land use. Your spot has like large sagebrush, saltbush, and greasewood, and some of these other ones that you mentioned, which is probably helpful for certain reasons versus what would happen here, like starting. I mean, those plants hold moisture, they have roots that go down and hold the soil together and stuff. So you're starting with something that's a baseline. And yeah, this spot and a lot of the adobes have hardly anything, or they might have like something annual in the spring that dies back or something like that. But it's really cool to walk around and see you have that you can work from to establish more. And
Yeah, you often wonder, like, who's going to get on with whom? If you look at sagebrush on a hill in the spring, there's a patch of land around it which is bare. That's what gave me the clue. Oh, it doesn't always want other plants around it, so I've got to move to a certain distance away from the sagebrush to plant anything. And yet, yes, it has those long roots, sometimes down to about as much as 13 feet, I think. So they're going to receive the water from the sky, and the water's going to drip down the plant and into the soil, down the roots. So whatever I plant next to it is going to benefit from that. And it's also going to benefit from the shade of the sagebrush too, because it's going to be like a nurse bush. And I think that all this food forest is a complete experiment, and so I am nudging the trees and bushes as close as I can to the sagebrush, because I feel like just in the name, sage, it's going to offer something, some wisdom, some memory, some, like, this plant knows how to survive here. Maybe it could pass that along in its aerosol beautiful scent that it has. Maybe it can pass on and all this information. I don't know. So far, cherries, Nanking cherries, honey locusts, mulberry. They're growing. They're companions. I'm still not sure how much they like each other, but they're companions.
yeah, I remember meeting you last winter and then giving you some biscuit root seeds. And I know that like wild onions and Mariposa lilies and biscuit roots do enjoy being, they'll be wherever, but they also enjoy being next to the sagebrush and sometimes inside of the bramble of the sagebrush, because possibly they've been given a little bit of boost, moisture and protection. Hopefully those seeds germinate. Sometimes it takes a second, but yeah.
Yeah, thank you for those. They're in there for sure. I put them all over under the sagebrush, and I marked them with flags so I knew which ones they were. However, I did hear that it's challenging to grow perennials from seed, and so, where I put them under the sagebrush, but I also put them in the wintertime in the hoof prints of the deer going by. So
that's a good one. Nikki tells me about that one a lot, to plant that way.
Yeah.
The mountain right here, why am I forgetting the name of it?
That way?
Yeah.
Electric
No,
mountain?
you can hike up it, and it's like here.
Gunnison?
No, it's small, right close to town.
Jumbo.
Jumbo.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of one side of Jumbo is pretty barren, as they say, but there's tons of different biscuit root species that grow in the barren zones.
Oh. Okay.
Like in the zones that people think, oh, there's nothing here, but you're like, in the spring, they're just carpeting. So that made me think, oh, maybe they would do well here, because some of the species really like it, the poor soil. So we'll see.
And they don't require much water, right? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
yeah. Depending on the species, but yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is a north-facing hill, so they need to... Well, I thought before I did the earthworks to slow sink and spread the water, I thought all drought-tolerant plants were needed here. And they are on one hill, which I haven't done earthworks on. However, on where I've done earthworks, I'm always getting too much water now. It's really
too much.
It's really working.
Too much.
I know. And last night I was thinking, oh, okay, so that's an interesting challenge to have now, which maybe I should look up perennial aquatic plants.
Cattails, always a good.
Well, I was looking here. There are things that grow. There are things that grow all over America. Like, have you ever heard of skirret?
Let me see the scientific name if it's there.
Yeah, it's there. Apparently grows all across America.
Like, what family is that in?
Aquatic, like a low maintenance root crop with few pest problems. The roots have a potato parsnip flavour.
You should try Wapato. Planting that. Have you heard of it called Wapato?
No.
They call it mud bananas sometimes in the upper Midwest, because you can harvest them in the fall, and they look like little bananas. You move around in the mud, and then it floats up, and it looks like a banana. And you chop it up, dry it, and it's like pasta.
Oh, I would love a mud banana. It's
Or wait, no, is that lotus? That's what they call mud banana. No, that's wild lotus. They call mud banana.
Oh, okay.
And you can eat in that way. Wapato takes a little more processing, but they both would be a possibility. I don't know.
Yeah.
Lotus likes mucky mud and stuff, but it would have to be a little more water, like there more of the time. But it could be cool. Yeah.
Well, this is the surprising thing, is that that you get feedback from what you've done, and then change, according to that feedback. And so Matt Springer, our friend, he lent me this book on perennial vegetables. It's called, by Eric Turnsmeyer. And yeah, I was suddenly drawn to the page of the aquatic plants, because I realized, oh my gosh, I may have too much water. Water celery. Skirret. Sounds like you need an accent to say that one. Skirret.
Maybe somebody listening knows about it and they can message us. Or I'm going to research it after this, because I feel like I have heard of it. Maybe there's another name I've heard it by too, but yeah.
Synonyms. Swickerwurtel.
It's like German.
Yeah, Swickerwurtel. But it looks fascinating. It looks like, I guess, like a Rastafarian. It looks like it's got a good haircut, a hairstyle. On the top, and the roots have a potato parsnip flavour. Actually, maybe that's the roots. I can't tell, actually. Oh, maybe those are the roots, and you eat the roots. Okay, so the roots is the funny-looking hairstyle.
There's also, like, here, putting in willow, beavers love it. Yeah. And it holds soil together, and, I mean, we have plenty of willow around, but I feel like establishing it in some spots could probably be helpful. Or Russian olive, dare we say. But,
I love Russian olive. I forage for Russian olive at this time of the year. It's delicious.
It's on the other side of the hill.
Yes.
Or, wait, that way, where the horses live.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of
the leaves, good for immunity, I heard, and the berries themselves I find delicious. They're kind of a little chalky but sweet. It's like sweet chalk, and they're right next to the rose bushes. Yeah, so I've had an interesting time planting the plants that go into this earthworks because I bought the plants at the beginning of the season, and now they've lost all their leaves and they've lost their labels, and so I don't know what they are. I'm looking at them saying, what are you? Who are you? And however, so I've got one that looks like a Russian olive, and so it's not. I know it's not. I definitely didn't buy it because it's not for they're not for sale here, but it looks like a Russian olive. So I'm going to put it down by the Russian olives. I think it's a sea berry.
Yeah, another Iliagnus, or in the same family, probably.
Yeah, so I'm just using clues from what grows here to what I bought and then matching it. And then there are rose bushes in certain areas too. I don't know if you've noticed there's just reading the landscape, I see this darker grass, which I've since understood to be seeps of water from water coming down the hills and underground and coming out in that area. But rose bushes, I was just sitting there the other day and I'd never noticed them before in those particular areas. You know, they seem to grow in the seeps. So I'm looking at all my plants because I know rose bushes are pink. You know, they have pink pink branches, and I'm looking at my plants and I'm saying, which one of you is pink? Oh, you are. I have no idea what you are, but you're going to go next to the rose. You know, if the rose can survive there, then maybe you can. So all the pink branched trees and bushes have been planted together in the seeps. And yeah, to tell you the truth, I really it's going to be surprised what comes up in the spring, because I lost all the labels. And some of these are only a few inches high, these bushes and
cuttings.
trees. Yeah, cuttings.
So you got a grant last year to install this.
Yes, it's a LOR Foundation grant, and it was for $10,000. And I just met Trace Axel and Marta Sanchez from Integral Pathways, and we just realized, we can work together. Let's figure this out. And those guys, they're earth workers, but they're also artists. I mean, they work in clay, you know. I mean, this is massive work in clay. So we're talking about 300 feet long terraces they've been making, and carving it into the clay. And so basically, just to go back, rewind a little bit, this grant was to create a storage system for water, which was innovative. That was the word, innovative. So I thought of several ways to store the water and to make it still run through the land. And one of those was to do hugel beds, and the other was to make terraces on the steeper part of the land, and then swales. And at the beginning of the terrace there would be a collection basin to collect water, and then at the end of the system would be an infiltration basin. And then I thought, well, maybe other people have done this, you know, terraces. Yes, it's been done for millions of years. Let me make a hugel bed terrace. You know, put all the decomposed wood inside the 300-foot long terrace. It had to be in the terrace itself was 8 foot wide, and the hugel bed is 2 feet wide and 3 feet deep. So that machinery could actually bring in all the materials for the hugel bed, which is the decomposing wood. I have cottonwood inside there, local cottonwood that was felled by beaver.
And cottonwood holds moisture and rots fast, right?
Yeah, that was a score. That was a real score. And I mean, that was just all part of living in a small town where somebody's old cottonwood becomes my treasure. You know, it's not, I'm never going to call it trash, but it's very much a treasure to me to take old wood like that, and they really wanted it off the premises.
And so hugel culture, for people who don't know anything about permaculture, basically is like you create space into the ground. Some people do it up, I guess, too, and then you basically add material depending on how fast it rots in a certain layer, right? And then you cover it, and the idea is that it creates something that becomes a nursery for whatever you plant in it. Is that kind of the idea?
Yeah, so you get different kind of stages of decomposing wood. And you know what? Just think of a forest. Just think of a forest. This is regenerative thinking. So what happens in a forest, an old tree would fall and it would start to decompose. Mm-hmm. And it may sink into the ground. And then on top of that, you get branches. You get a deer passing by, it's going to poop on it. You get the hair from a rabbit sticking to it. You get birds, their feathers will drop on it, or maybe the whole bird will drop on it and start to decompose. And it will become the soil in many years' time. It'll become soil. It could be 50 years' time. It becomes soil. The combination of all these factors, plus the rain, plus any moisture, means that you have the perfect ingredients for the forest floor. So that's how I'm thinking. I'm thinking, well, let me just pretend it's already a forest. And let me pretend that these big trees have fallen into the ground, and that so they're in the ground, the whole trunk of the trees is in the ground. And then the branches from trees, say fruit trees, they've collapsed into the ground, so I put branches in there. I put compost in there because that would be the fruit from the trees and the and nuts and things like that. That compost goes in there. And then I put bone meal, which would be like the animals decomposing. So that bone meal is crushed up animal bones, and put chicken feathers in there. You know, they actually sell those. I did go to a local farm, and he said, no, we're using all our chicken feathers. So people, yeah, they use them for long-term nitrogen release in the soil.
We need nitrogen in this area. Where I am from out east, it's more the opposite. You have to lime the soil every year. Right. Because it goes more acidic and more... Well, nitrogen is a little bit different than pH, but yeah. You always need nitrogen. You know, like your leaf and your wet and your dry materials to make your compost. But yeah, I look out and I'm like, oh gosh, how much they would benefit from having lots of chicken poop here.
Yeah. The chickens, unfortunately, the predator birds come. Let's say there are lots of predator birds come if there are chickens here. So just on the top of the hugel bed, you just add back the clay. You know, you just and for the hugel bed terraces, I made it flush with the ground. But yes, I do have a hugel bed that does have a hill. That's what hugel means in German, as a hill. And that will gradually decompose and go down to the soil level too. But I think the most important thing is that the water sinks in slowly, and it inside there, of course, you know, especially as these materials are all local, you've got new microorganisms, fungi starting to work, and you're activating them and bringing in a whole new life into clay, into soil. And you know, you can plant in the hugel bed terrace, and so far I've planted just cover crop, just to cover it for the winter time, just so that there's something there. So the collection basin fills up with water. I get half a share of water. Half a share is not very much. I know it's more than nothing, but it's only just more than nothing.
That's like you have a well? Or no, you get irrigation water, that's a half a share.
So the water evaporates from the ocean, comes up into these clouds, goes down the mountain, and from the mountain it drips and runs into all our irrigation systems here, so ditches and canals and ditches, and then it goes through a pipe and it goes over to the opposite hill and down that pipe and then up to me here, us here, by gravity.
Down and back up. Oh.
By gravity, yeah, that hill is higher than this hill. So half a share is like Tuesday afternoon. It's like, it's not a lot of water. So on any Tuesday afternoon, when the irrigation is on, so that'll be between about end of April to September.
So you only can turn on your irrigation one day a week for half a day. Versus some people can do it every day depending on their share. I mean, this is something that in other places people have no concept of because water is a different thing. But here,
and this is
complex.
Irrigation water that's just separate from the tap water, drinking water. So, it's we get very minimal water. And we here are right at the end of the line too. So we get everything, all the...
What's left.
Yeah.
And so saving water, keeping water on your land is then super important for making sure things can actually survive.
Yeah.
The things you're planting.
Yeah.
So you get a little irrigation, but then having ponds and water catchment, beaver analog dams and things like that.
Yeah.
It's kind of key for like being able to actually restore dry land with very minimal irrigation.
Yeah. And the water on that Tuesday afternoon would fill up that that basin, that first basin, and then there's a spillway, which is lovely, into the terrace, the first terrace, and the terrace is sloped downwards at 1%. Mm-hmm. So it's not on contour, it's actually going down at 1%. So the water flows on the hillside of the terrace and to another spillway right at the side of the hill, and it comes back on another terrace, which is almost 300 feet, and then over another spillway, and then into a swale, and then it goes, wraps around the hill again, and then another swale, and into the infiltration basin. From the infiltration basin, if that fills up, it goes around the outside, and then into a culvert under the road, and then it goes into a field, and if there are drops left, it goes into the ditch, and the ditch goes into the North Fork of the Gunnison River, and the Gunnison River goes into the Colorado, and the Colorado goes into the ocean. And so the water evaporates. It's supposed to, I know. I keep saying it does, but it's take those drops. That's fitting into the larger system. It's this tiny plot of land slows that water drop down, and yet I don't do any of these earthworks without consulting with our bigger body of landowners here. So it's really important to work as a group.
That's something that when I've done permaculture trainings, I've often thought about. Like, there's a social, cultural piece. There's an element of like, yeah, that's a piece, but how it actually works out in person is something you can never fully predict. But if we're restoring ecosystems which don't fit into boxes, then we will have to talk to our neighbors because we all own plots of land, or some of us own plots of land, some of us live on other people's plots of land or whatever, but it's what you're going to do is going to affect people upstream and downstream. And I think in a place like this where water especially is such a big thing, and land fertility, and there's things that no matter what your beliefs about these things are, people might be on board with, at least right here, maybe, in other areas, maybe not, but some of it makes sense for people to be on board with. Well, like, yeah, we would like to see this look different in this way too. What can we do? And some people have more time and energy to put into it than others, but it does look like you're like slowly starting to collaborate with your neighbors on like what you're doing and what maybe they could do upstream or downstream. We were just talking about the folks across the way here and like wondering what their projects are, and Megan's spot right here could potentially be conjoined with the food forest in some way. Like it's cool to see that you have this drainage here that is kind of collective in a way. Everybody's affected by it, And not everybody has a scenario like that who's trying to do restoration in the way that you're doing it. So it sounds pretty cool.
Sometimes the water is unseen. So, yes, collaborating with the neighbours is absolutely key, and it's foremost in whatever I do here. And the reason is because we're all in the same watershed. So once I figured out what the watershed is, and they actually helped me with that because a neighbour here has the technology to figure out how the watershed runs from the West Alp Mountains. Once we figured out we're all on the same watershed, then, and yet the water is unseen. So we live by the mountains here, but I'm on a mud hill. So where does the water go? It goes to everywhere else, but it doesn't go to this mud hill. However, I challenge that and I say to folks, well, there are 5 actually it's this direction, there are 5 aquifers up there in the mountains that I do know, and we're down from the mountains. What if there was a fissure in the aquifer and the water does come down, but it comes down underground? Have we, I'm not into excavating for the water, other than the trees doing the work themselves.
Mm.
And I've subsequently found that, yes, there is water underground. It's 72 feet down.
Mm.
And yet if I find trees whose roots can stretch that far, I'm not sure if they do, but if they could stretch that far, then this is a closed system.
It can pull it up into
Yeah.
the soil.
Yeah, that's how the trees will transpire and bring up the water, and then the water will change the ecosystem around the tree. And so just thinking in closing all the water loops, meaning that these are systems that we're working with, like, where does the water go after it's 72 feet down? I've got, I imagine where it goes afterwards. And once you imagine it, I think it becomes a reality. For me, it does. Anyway, I actually tested with dowsing rods, and it is 72 feet down, and we do have a seam of water coming down, so...
That's super cool.
Yeah, so when you say it's not necessarily in other neighborhoods, I think if you think in other ways of the water being in different places, being in the sky, being underground, it's there. We just need to put it into our consciousness. And what I do is live in what's the expression, the term? It's the opposite of living into drought. It's living into the possibility of abundant water all the time, abundant water. People here, it's crazy. It's, 3-minute showers, things like that. I live in the possibility of abundant water and don't think of the scarcity of it. I think of the abundance, but I just keep finding it in places, just like that cloud.
Mm-hmm. I came with some students of mine in the spring. I was teaching ecology courses this summer, and the first session I did was focused on riparian ecologies. And so we visited and studied different areas that you would call riparian in this region. And so we came here and somebody was like, what's riparian about this? We're going up onto this mud hill. And I thought, okay, what's riparian about it, for one thing, is what you're doing to catch water. And then also you do have the pond and this drainage here, and then the beavers. And you took us to this really cool beaver complex dam system that's super close to here. I need to go over and peek on a morning walk or something, but it was really neat to look at that and see it in this little nook. And of course, talking about beavers could be a whole 3-hour conversation maybe on its own, but I think about what do these hills look like when beavers could be where they want to be, What would they look like?
Yeah.
Would they have more trees? Would they have, I don't know,
Right. Well, the neighbor has the beaver. The beaver hasn't jumped over the valley yet, and that's okay because I'm going to plant the willow and the cottonwood to provide the food for them when they come, because they're coming.
It's super close.
They're really close. I need to have the sound of running water for them to really come here. But we saw something in the pond the other day, didn't we?
We
Do
did.
you know whether that was a beaver or not?
I thought that was an otter.
Yeah.
Right?
It just raised its head for a couple of seconds, and
We saw it
I
swimming
was
and
trying
playing.
to look for orange teeth, because beaver have orange teeth.
And it had a big fat tail and long tail. I guess I should.
Maybe it has arrived. I don't know.
I thought it was an otter, but it was a little more playful than what I imagined. And Montana thought it was an otter. It was really cute. It was like coming up to us, wanting to it was like curious, And I don't know. I should go down there more and see.
I have to go back very, very quietly. Yeah, but I was helping our neighbour here, Phil, with his beaver deceiver. He has a couple of beaver deceivers, and it wasn't quite deceiving the beaver, and because it just wasn't working. So I was helping him with that, and we had to dislodge a part of the beaver dam that was built around the deceiver, and we took out these poles that the beaver had sharpened to put in. Oh my gosh, the artistry in that is like. It was like sharpened pencils on both ends, but huge pencils, about 3 inches wide diameter. And my friend Marta and I brought them back here because we wanted to encourage the beaver. So we thought if we bring some of the sticks, we could make like a little totem. I don't know whether that's the word for totem or what. So we made one with all these little sticks, and they're you cannot mistake a beaver. That's what we've been doing, is looking for beaver activity down by the pond, looking for...
that creature had a home in the side of the bank, because we watched it swim to the other side and go into the side of it, and there's like a little nook over there in the high plants. I don't know if it was a otter or beaver or what, but there's somebody down there.
Somebody, there's life. And there's a kingfisher in that next to that pond the other day too, which was really surprising. I didn't see it at first. I heard it, just splash into the water and hover, splash into the water, hover, splash. And that is great, because I wasn't sure about the the health of that pond. I wasn't sure whether... I've seen frogs and toads, and I've seen frogs and toads also at the top of the land. That was really interesting to me.
Like by your airstream?
Yeah, right by the
Really?
airstream. Yeah, and I asked the toad, I said, "How did you get here?"
You're like, "Why are you up here? It's so
Why are you up
on
here?
top of the hill."
And then I think I was distracted by the prairie dogs going chip, 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 chip. And then I connected the two, actually, because after I studied the prairie dogs a little bit, I realized, they're underground tunnels, in all these hills. They're conduits of water themselves, Do not disturb the prairie dog tunnels, because it's like irrigation. And it's also life for the prairie dog, obviously. And I think the toad came up through the tunnel, because it's nice and moist. Yes, so there's your riparian zone right there.
Does the prairie dogs come all the way up to the airstream? I know there's some on the other side over here in this more open field area, but they pretty much go all the way across, right?
Yeah, they're fun. They're pretty tame. Pretty tame. I don't want them in the airstream, but they do get pretty close. Yes, I don't hear them as much these days. I think it's just because they've got used to me, because they used to make a big chip, 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 chip,
ruckus
chip,
when you're around
sound when I came up the hill. And you know their language. Do you know their language? Oh, okay, so it's really quite sophisticated. So they have predators. The predators have, and there are 2-century prairie dogs that guard the entrance to the holes, and they'll do the chip, 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 warning that a predator is coming by. And a human is a predator, or at least it's a danger of a sort. And, fox and red-tailed hawk, and they will have a different language for the different species. So human might be chip, 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 chip. Red-tailed hawk might be chip, 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 chip. And it's not just the species, it's also the colour too. So if I'm wearing grey that day, it might be cheap, 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 cheap.
How did we figure this out?
And it's speed too. Somebody's recorded them and looked at the predators walking by, probably put them in, I don't know. Somebody has figured it out scientifically. Anyway, wow. If there are new people that come to the land, I hear the prairie dogs, because it's like, there's a fast-walking human wearing green. I don't understand what they're saying. It's just that I heard.
I remember. I don't know if it was in the spring. When you were figuring out your design and how you wanted to do some of the earthworks, you ended up changing it. I don't know if you had originally thought to do it where the old sagebrush was, or before you realized how much the prairie dog should stay intact, and so you are kind of like, you changed your whole design. You changed your design at least somewhat due to what you've been observing about what's already working, I guess. It's like more collaboration. I mean, I think some people who do permaculture work totally think that way, and other people don't necessarily as much. It's more like, everybody's different about it. Yes. It's supposed to be collaborative, but often people want to just like plop down something and plant 100 things and not figure out how actually you might want to leave some stuff to be in certain ways. And yeah.
Well, that came as a result of convening with the neighbours. So we're on hills here, north-facing hills with gullies in between. Mm-hmm. And each one of us have roughly 2 hills, with the gullies. And convening with the neighbour here, I thought that our project would be to do check dams in the gullies here, because they're really quite steep, and if we did check dams, we could slow sink that water into little dams and then have swales going off to the side, and that could spread the water that is in the dammed, could spread the water to the side, over to the hills. So that was one idea, but then she said, what, if we do that, Elizabeth, you're going to go into the animal holes, with the swales over there. And then I suddenly remembered, she's absolutely right, there are prairie dog holes there. I can't disturb the prairie dog holes because they're a keystone species and I'm not going to touch them. So I banked that whole idea and then went to another idea, and was going to do the same thing with these check dams, but in a sagebrush area. And my other neighbour over the other side, he came over and said, well, Elizabeth, there's sagebrush there. And I said, oh, you know what, you're right. It's just these people.
Sometimes it takes hundreds of years.
Yeah. And
it's cryptobiotic soil and all the...
Yeah, and I'm just coming here in 2023 and saying, yeah, I got all this money, I can do... No, just respect the sagebrush.
Yeah.
And so... And then I was riding around on my little electric four-wheeler here, and I was pretty desperate for a place, to do these... I had this idea to do these terraces and swales and stuff, and then I was doing biodynamics at the time. That's right, it's where you bring down the power from the cosmos in silica. And I was doing and I always have interesting aha moments while doing the biodynamics, and I was doing it on my machine, and kind of flicking this preparation from the machine onto this bare hillside that, yes, of course I've seen it before, but I hadn't seen it as to be this project, and it was perfect. It was steep, and then it wasn't steep, and then there was place for 2 ponds, and it was perfect. And there was hardly any vegetation on it, just like 3 rose bushes and a lot of native grasses. And so, ta-da, that was it. That was the place. I was so excited. I went over to the neighbours, and he was just like, okay, that sounds like a good idea. And that's where it really worked out. So I think, spending time visiting with the neighbours, having them over, involving them in the conversation, making sure I don't move until everybody's on board and everybody agrees. No matter what the feedback is to work with it, because I'm going to live here for a long time with these folks, and we're all going to, and whatever I do here affects them. So I really want to work with them. We're working as one community. And there's another part of the land that I'd like to work with another neighbour on, and I'll just wait. I'll wait until the time is right. Yes, and we're ready to proceed. There's no rush with this. I mean, the grant money you have to spend within a year. However, anything's possible. You can make it work. I really believe that.
Do you feel like it's helped your eco grief?
Oh my God. Do you know what? I can draw a tree now. But I don't have to, because I've created one. I've created this beautiful system where the tree will produce fruit. It's living. It's alive. It's got water around it all over. And it's in a sanctuary.
Yeah, last week before the weather got colder and messier, you were just pretty much out there every day digging holes, planting, trying to get everything in while you still could. Yeah.
It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, for eco grief, if there's one thing that helps it, it's to dig a hole. Just to dig a hole. And stick something in it. Stick something in it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, should we put on some clothes and maybe do a brief walk around?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Here we go.
Crunch.
We're out in the snow for a moment. We're gonna walk around and look at stuff. It was pretty amazing. Like, came here last winter and you guys did a project putting in some beaver analog dams and planted some biscuit root seeds, a few things, and then coming back in the spring and seeing how lush it actually. I mean, we had a very rainy spring this year too, but just seeing how lush it was so amazing.
Yeah, they're officially, according to my beaver friend Nicole Fox, they're officially like check dams. She's from Giver Dam, and she said, "Those are not beaver dam analog," she goes, because there's no running water by them except at this time of the year. So they've been made out of willow. They're little dams made out of willow that we placed in the gullies before we knew what check dams were. They were the original check dam, and we call them BDAs. They're sweet. The deer seem to like to bed this side of them, so uphill of them. So I tried that one time. Yeah, I tried to bed myself down there one time, and it is actually a nice little nook. So what makes me think is that there's probably different microorganisms down there. There's probably, because they poop down there, and then they fertilize stuff, different flora, and this simple trickle of water of the snow coming through that gully and down through the leaky willow dams.
Marta was saying the other side of this hill is there's more flowing water in the spring.
Oh,
that's why they're putting the
down
pond
the gully.
in.
Yeah. They did a check down with an excavator down there. Yeah. I mean, you think dams not very good, but they're leaky dams. That's what they are. They leak. It doesn't sound great, does it? But they leak the water through. They just
that makes sense.
Temporarily stop it. Yeah. Slow it. Actually, I don't stop it at all. I temporarily slow.
And something I learned so much this year teaching about the ecology of this area is how vitally important our interaction with the land as it relates to water is in the bigger whole of how things are connected, like what happens here affects what happens in Mexico.
Yeah, exactly, and it's very important. Today I was drawing in my journal, it's in the car. Yeah. I met with let's go that way, the indigenous, the Wiwa of Colombia. They came here and we gave offerings to the land. It's also offerings to the land and offerings to the water. And it's very important to take water from the headwaters, which we're in here in Colorado. We're at the headwaters of the Colorado River, the tributaries that lead into the Colorado River. And it's very important to take the water from there down to Mexicali. For the dolphins and for the whales, they need to remember the origins of the water. So the more that we do that, the more that we can encourage that water to become a true flowing system. Look, there's the licorice.
Oh.
I was so excited that I could grow licorice here. I don't know, it's just one of those plants that I like drinking the tea.
This is different than the wild licorice that grows down by the river.
Is it?
I don't know, is it? I'm asking.
Oh, I don't know. I'd love to find that licorice. It's funny, isn't it?
Yeah, it's in the same genus.
Yeah,
It's all along the river. At Groundwork, there's tons of it.
Is there?
Yeah, same genus, but different than the one you buy in the store.
Okay. Well, this funny little plant had, not this one, but a nearby farm, Thistle Whistle, he had lots of licorice plants, and I asked Mark, the owner, I said, do you mind if I take some seeds, And he said, no, go ahead. So that's in the pea family, so it's a pod, peas, like little peas in a pod, seeds. And I took them home, and I thought, oh my gosh, these are really difficult to get out, because I was using...
They're kind of like Velcro-y, right?
Yeah, they're Velcro, but also they're tight inside. The pods were all like wrinkly and everything, and I went back to him. I said, they're really difficult to get out. And then I looked at the plants again, and they were just sitting there, and they'd burst, the seed pod had burst open and were just literally offering the seeds. I'd just not timed it right. A week later I could have easily have gone back and collected those seeds. It's just all about the timing. They wanted to give themselves a week later, so I was able to get it.
I love this little nook of the lands. It looks like you have a lot of compost and wood chips right there, but just the sagebrush is almost as tall as us in some spots. Or some of there's a bunch of different bushes here, but...
Yeah, I got chicory in between. That seems to grow well. The chicory, look at it now at this time of the year. It looks like lollipops. It's
the snow.
Yeah. I have taken the root out and done that very laborious method of making, I would never call it coffee, but it's what people would call coffee, a decaf kind of coffee out of the root. And it's really delicious. I drink it. This grows just naturally here. I don't think I've ever planted this.
What do you envision this zone looking like in 20 years right here?
Oh, great question. Okay, so this is the main pathway through, but there are other pathways and there are portals. So part of the 7-layered food forest, we're entering a portal right now. So imagine that this is the vine layer of the 7-layered food forest. It comes up and over like this. And actually these are not the grapevines, this is something else. This is the grapevine down here. That's the portal into the 7-layered food forest. So we have a tall canopy tree, which is that honey locust over there. And this mulberry tree would also be a tall canopy tree. And then the sub-canopy would be Nanking cherry, peach I have close by, and then large bushes or shrubs under that would be this chokecherry here, blackcurrant right here, and the next layer down would be like medicinals and perennial vegetables. So you can't see anything here now, but I've got yarrow, valerian, asparagus. Actually, that I think would be root layer.
Something squash like here?
Yeah. No, that's actually a sage root. Yeah, this is a sage
now look
root.
closer.
Yeah.
It's like a sage that died.
Yeah. It's never dead though. It always pretends to be dead.
Oh.
But yeah.
Some leaves that sprout from this?
Maybe, yeah. It's
yeah,
just
there's
this area is
one
trampled
right
with-
there.
Yeah, look at that. You see it? It's such a hardy plant.
What?
So that would be like in the bush shrub layer, and then the medicinal or the perennial vegetable layer will be under that, and then ground cover, cover crop, and then a root layer and a vine layer are the other two layers of the 7-layered food forest. So I've got turnips. I don't really have many annuals here, but in the cover crop there are turnips and radishes, and then the vines would be those grapes that created the portal. Yeah, so mainly they're, I started with drought tolerant, and then
You take seeds from the plants that are already here too, right? And spread them.
Yeah, I do that with the 4-winged saltbush and the 2-winged saltbush, which is the shad scale. I do it with the sage. The sage is actually easy to grow. Just take those at the end of the season. I actually have potted those seeds, those
Cool.
and rabbit brush. Yeah, but you can just lay them on the ground. But if you really want to control the oh, look at the deer over there! Do you see them?
Hi. Oh. They didn't run away.
They didn't run
Yet.
away. Oh, that's great. They're used to me. They're used to me. Maybe they just don't like the trailer on the car. That's what might be it. Yeah, that rattles up the hill.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's great. They don't run away. They really settle. It's lovely to come in this season actually, because they settle here. They've probably bedded down
There's the
here last night. Yes, right on top of the sagebrush that we thought was dead. That's probably why it's flattened like that, because the deer have come. You see where they sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and
They like it up
ruminate.
here in your nooks they've created. Do they mess with any of the fruit trees that you plant? Like
Yes.
nibbling the bark and
They help me prune it. rascals. I give them so much food. I mean, they can have anything but the trees, please. Please. And so I have to put fences around the trees. But you know what? I asked the neighbour over there, I said, how do you keep the deer away from your plants? And he just says, I talk to them. And I said, well, do you talk to the plants or you talk to the... He said, I talk to the deer. I ask them to stay away. This is like very advanced biodynamics. So I could sit and chat with these folks over here and just say, please,
4.
you can take anything. Look at the camouflage. Look
Yeah.
at that.
There's like 4 of them slowly walking away,
Yeah. It's
nibbling.
It's a nice little family. Yeah.
Pretty cute.
So this is the area where the prairie dogs' tunnels are. We're actually on the top of the prairie dog tunnels, and wasps' nests and all kinds of things under the
really?
ground that contribute. It's just like those tunnels, the wasps, the spiders, they all seem to make tunnels where the earth can... It's like a respiratory system. It's like a lung. The earth can breathe through those tunnels. It's very important to keep everything that makes tunnels. Spiders, wasps, prairie dogs, any other little creatures, I have them because of the compost piles, but...
Often people don't like prairie dogs because they think it's gonna break their animals' legs, or they just don't want to like them and they poison them or shoot them or whatever.
Yeah, it's kind of sad because they are a keystone species. I mean, I've 150 species they keep alive, I heard. Yeah, it's a lot.
Wow.
It's a lot. It's really a
So
lot.
they create life just like the beaver does for everyone else.
Who knows, maybe that toad, that came through the prairie dog tunnels, it keeps him alive. Maybe the owl that eats the microorganisms that sit on the poop of the prairie dog at the entrance to the tunnel. Everything's connected.
Mm-hmm.
And the prairie dog is eaten by... So prairie dogs over here, they're so friendly. It's unfortunate for them that they're so friendly, because I saw one approach a red-tailed hawk to its demise. Yes,
You saw it get eaten?
yeah, because it was just curious. It was like, "Oh, who are you?" And it's walking up to it. I was thinking,
no.
"Oh, be careful." But it was snatched. Yeah. So that's such is life. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think that with using the biodynamics, I think it just attracts these animals to. That's what they said, and since I've done it, since I've been using biodynamics, the horses come with their riders, but horses just come to this area here, seem to love just coming up here, and then we've got 2 wild Mustang over there.
They're really
And
sweet.
then- yeah, very
Pet
sweet.
them the other day.
Very
Super sweet. Yeah.
Dogs come, and the deer are always here.
There they go, slowly going across the hill.
Which is good. It means they're not frightened of us. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
that's great.
Well, if people wanted to come volunteer or learn from you, are you opening any possibilities for that in the future?
Yeah. It's like I need 1,000 holes dug. I got another grant from Zero Foodprint where I need to plant 1,000 trees in between the sagebrush and where the new earthworks are. So if anybody wants to dig a hole, if they're feeling a little griefy, night owl food forest.
A lot of things to be grieved about these days. So
yeah, there
many
really
layers
is.
of things. Yeah.
There really is, and somehow digging a hole seems to help. It's just that very, very basic connection with the earth. And yeah, Night Owl Food Forest, that's the name of the forest here.
Do you have any social media presence for the food forest yet?
Yeah, it has its own Facebook page.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Cool. No website, no Instagram.
No, not yet. No.
Yeah.
No.
Not a
Yes.
destination spot yet.
Oh, it's totally a destination
it is
spot.
for deer.
Exactly. There's nowhere to live here. You could pitch a tent in the freezing cold or the boiling hot.
The sunrise
What I would
here
suggest,
intense,
is come through. Come through this town. Come and visit. Come and do. It's the best, I think, is if you come to a town and you have an experience. For me anyway, I'm not a tourist anymore in towns. I'd like to go to visit and to really know what people are up to and be inspired by that. So if anybody seriously wants to come and dig a hole, and you don't need to know how to dig a hole, it's it's one of those things that just comes kind of naturally. Or they want to learn about earthworks or regenerative thinking, and just to enjoy the place and just to pass through and just to have that an experience. They're very, very welcome to come.